Security is no longer an afterthought, especially in the cloud native world. Companies are taking security seriously, but security is a very complex challenge. It becomes even more complicated with the fact that there is a shortage of cloud native security experts. On top of that, we have legacy security vendors who try to bring their legacy security stack, stitch them together with some cloud native solutions, and offer them to users. To talk about these challenges and potential solutions, we have with us on our show Abner Germanow, Vice President of Product Marketing at Lacework. Abner, welcome to the show.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
You position yourself as a security for the cloud generation. So I have a question for you. Number one, how would you define cloud generation?
Yeah. So, I define the cloud generation as all of these companies that are becoming software businesses. Every company is becoming a software business, and the cloud generation represents that generation of builders who are building on Amazon, Azure, Google, and they're building their companies, and they're building software differently, faster than we've ever done it before. And that on-prem world of static data centers is gone. Now we're in the cloud, and resources are dynamic. They're controlled with APIs. They're different software architectures, very different ways of building software, and that sort of new way of building software in a focused fashion harnessed the innovation of the cloud providers. It's a new generation. It requires new security. It requires new ways of working, and security is like one of those places where the cloud generation is doing things differently.
Now, if you look at security providers, most of them are legacy security providers who are entering the cloud native computing space. They are acquiring cloud native companies and stitching together their own software solution and offering them to cloud native users. Now, these users have the burden to manage this security stack themselves. Cloud native is not about plumbing and managing your stack. It is about building services that add value to your business. So, do you see a disconnect here? And if you do, how does Lacework approaches security differently?
Yeah, so I think there's the first thing about, I would say, sort of the legacy security providers who are trying to get into the cloud environment is that, first of all, like, their worldview is very different. They have firewall businesses that are cratering. They have sort of this enterprise security worldview, and they look at that business and they go, "Hey, this cloud thing is going great guns. Let's go into that market." And so they go acquire a couple of companies. And they have some marketing that shows that they understand the problem around cloud builders, but they miss a couple of big things. One is a lot of them are on-prem software, so they force the customer to manage their own software. They tend to buy these point products that solve point problems. And then try to stitch them in together in some kind of sort of platform-esque way, and they miss the fact that they're building a product for people who are builders and not like security people first. So their customers need to be builders first and security people second. And then the second is actually the technical approach of how they go about building their products. There's a long history in the security market of security people starting security companies to solve a particular threat or mitigate something. And that approach has left the humans who have to do the work, who have to figure out what's happening in their environment, left with picking up all the pieces and trying to build all the context. And so the Lacework approach is very, very different. We make the assumption that, hey, there's a lot of that toil of pulling together the context of what's happening inside your environment. And machines can take that job on and stitch all the context together so that humans don't have to do all that work. They don't have to write rules and and kind of manage all the change. And the end result of that is you end up with a product that allows for constant innovation without the security team having to hold everything up, which is just a classic problem where people are innovating way faster than security can keep up. And never mind that the attacks are different as well. So that technical approach of whose responsibility for connecting all the dots is really key. Is it the humans that are responsible for connecting the dots, or is it the product that's responsible for connecting the dots? And in Lacework's case, Lacework's approach to ingesting all the data and mapping it and then understanding those behaviors, we do all the dot connection, and then it's the humans that can make decisions from that context.
Right. And in contrast, the way traditional security works is by chasing the attack and then try to contain things by either writing rules, creating policies, and sending out alerts. They do work in traditional IT space and even in cloud native space to some extent, but in cloud native world, things move way too fast for that. And I wonder if the traditional approach works at all in the cloud native space.
Yeah, it completely fails in the cloud, right? So if you think about what would it take to write a rule on every new technology, on every new cloud service, all the different APIs, and all the different constantly changing software architectures. A human can't do that. And even if the human could do it, they would have to have a PhD in Amazon, a PhD in the security tool itself, and they'd have to have a PhD in your own environment. And so, those people don't exist. There's no unicorn out there of some security architect that happens to know all these things. And so, what we see happening is people have to understand what's happening. They have to have observability in terms of everything that's happening. But that's the beginning of. And so, for example, what we do is map all of the activities, everything that's happening from every user that makes a change to every application that connects to other applications. And we stitch all that context together. And so we can see all the different activities, which is essentially a flight recorder of all the activities in the cloud. Once you have that flight recorder of what's happening, then you can both apply rules to that, but you can also analyze all that activity and understand what's normal activity versus anomalous activity. And that's super important because the anomalous activity is something you've never seen before. It's just something weird that's going on in your cloud that may be a good thing. It might be, the Belgian development team is using a new Amazon service. Well, you should know that. And that might be a good thing. Or you have a situation where somebody does something well-intentioned, but puts the company at risk. And historically, that data is just buried in a Splunk log somewhere. So, that ability to see the context of what happens and just understand when there are weird things happening, as well as early attack indicators of, somebody grabs a credential from a Lambda and goes and uses it in a weird place. So, that the ability to see the weird things and expect and go find the weird things, that's the hard part of security in the cloud, where I don't know what those weird things might be. And because it's changing so often, I have to have that visibility. And then the last bit is I can't just have that visibility available to the security people, right? It can't be buried in the context of, it can't be buried and, pulled out 6 months later when finance says, hey, what's this on our bill? I need to know what's happening now. I need to know that I can go work with the Belgian development team to make sure they do things properly. I need to, call up the developer that just deployed something in some weird region of Amazon that we don't normally deploy things in. That was an honest mistake, but we need to surface that context very, very quickly in order to get those feedback loops. And the security industry is just not set up to do that today. That's not how they think, and that's not how the customers are attuned to thinking about what's happening inside their environment.
Now, let's just stay with customers. To them, security is often a cat and mouse game. They're always a step behind from attackers. They're often reacting. So, are there ways to stop attacks before they actually happen? Do you see anything happening in that space?
Yeah, for sure. And I think, one of the things that you have to understand about attacks is that for the most part, there's this sort of movie hacker thing where they're like pew 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 pew, right? And so there's this notion that like an attack happens really fast. The reality is that most attacks begin with just people are out there looking for EC2 instances that need to, that they can take over, and a crypto miner can start crypto mining on it before they do something more nefarious. And so, those early attack indicators are fairly common, and you got to go get those early attack indicators. And they tend to show up as just weird things. It's an application that's doing something weird that might be a piece of malware. It's a credential that was started with a Lambda function, but is now doing something that that Lambda functions shouldn't do. And so that ability to go from, okay, what's happening right now in that proactive stance versus the reactive stance of, best case, I'm writing a rule and I've got a great rule set that looks at my logs and allows me to do that, to more of a worst case where I'm just shoving my logs for storage in case something happens. And then the way that people are surfacing problems in my environment is that the finance team comes and says, what's this weird thing on our bill? And the fact that most security problems are found through finance, like that's a career limiting problem for people. And you have if you say, okay, digital transformation, let's go create a wonderful secure business. How do you do that? Like, how do you do that with reactive security? You wouldn't expect that in any other place. And so, but we've put that burden on people. We've put this burden of we're gonna focus on humans to go figure out the context of what happened. And I have one customer that calls it the mean time to WTF, right? Because security people are really caught in a weird place. If they see something strange and they tell people, hey, this is a strange thing, but it's not, then they look like, tinfoil hat people. If they see something that's, or if they miss something that's significant, then afterwards they're like, you're terrible, you're, awful human, we're going to fire you. And so like, there's no winning. And part of that is that mean time to WTF, understanding whether something is real or not. It's just way too hard in the cloud. And so you need machines to come help you figure that out and make people successful that way.
Yes, it is hard. And there is always a huge gap between supply and demand of security expert, especially in the cloud native space. So my question to you is, how do businesses secure their applications in the cloud if there isn't talent available? Do you have any advice there?
Security used to be able to stand on the outside and just say no, right? And that was kind of okay. But when you have a business where attesting to the security, understanding the security of the business is critical to the go-to-market process. If you want to go sell to larger customers, if you want to go expand into international regions, you have to be there. But but you can't just hire massive teams of people to understand what's happening inside your environment. And so, the DevSecOps piece it's real, but there's been a huge focus on shifting left. So, there's this notion that, hey, if we just configure things properly, if we just get rid of vulnerabilities before they go into production, we'll be okay, and that'll fix everything. But if you look at the history of DevOps, what DevOps has really been about is feedback loops between the reality of production and what's the next thing that we want to go do. And maybe that's customer experience, maybe it's a security problem, maybe it's new functionality or new products. But understanding and building those feedback loops has not really been part of the security mantra. There's been a lot of push on like, okay, let's do everything about shifting left, and that creates two problems. One is you have security teams that become bottlenecks, or you have this sort of very finite number of people who are experts, and then you kind of miss, to your point, like what's happening at 3:00 in the morning. Or you get somebody that says that they see something and they go, oh no, that's happening, like we should do something about it. And like making that decision and who can make that decision is today too much of an art and not enough of a science. So, if you look at the science of how do you find which vulnerabilities actually matter? This is a great example. So, there's the millions of vulnerabilities in CVE lists, and you can look at the sort of legacy vulnerability management providers who basically say, oh, you have thousands of vulnerabilities. Well, if only you had the data that gave the right context to the developer to say, actually, it's this image with this software package that has this fixable critical vulnerability. Oh, well, now I'm having a real conversation about it. And it's a data-driven conversation. It's not based on my opinion of something. It's like, hey, and oh, by the way, it's not just that you have that vulnerability, but it's in the service that we really care about, right? Like all the different pieces of context have been missing. And I think that's a huge shift in the way that security has been done in the past, where I get to this point where now I have to infer what's happening. Whereas in the cloud, the very cool thing is all the data that I need to make those decisions, that data exists. It just needs to be processed and presented properly to the teams. And that's what Lacework's all about, like taking that data in various ways and providing it to people that have to make compliance decisions, that have to make cloud activity decisions and understand what their teams are doing. People who have to make workload decisions about what their applications are doing. People who have to make vulnerability decisions about which vulnerabilities to fix. Like those are all decisions and tasks that require a lot more context and data. Or if you have that context and data, then you can talk to your customers very, very effectively, or you can talk to your teammates very, very effectively without being the kind of highest paid person's opinion. It's just, here's the data, off we go.
Can you talk about the role of channel partners and consultants, as cloud native security is a crowded space where different solutions, different open source projects are coming from different vendors, which makes it quite a challenge for customers to pick and choose and then stitch all those solutions together?
Yeah, so I think there are a couple different pieces of that. One is there are a ton of security vendors. So roughly 80% of our customers consolidate multiple products when they join on with us. And sometimes that's on day one, and sometimes that's a year later. That sort of consolidation of functionality into a single platform is very attractive to people. The other piece, in terms of like the broader ecosystem and how we fit in, there are, I think that speaks to the innovation that's occurring in cloud environments and the constant change. we have existing relationships with, say, the SIM vendors, where instead of putting all the raw data there, we pre-process it and then place just the most important data in the tools that you have, or in the CI/CD tools and the various delivery and development tools. How do you insert vulnerability scanning into those tools? And many of them are open source, and some of them are closed source. And like, what we want to do is make sure that the data is available to the individuals that need to use it. And then the last comment I would make on that entire ecosystem is, when you look at the consultants, when you look at the managed service providers that work with customers to stitch all these pieces together and make them work inside their own environments, that crowd is changing, especially in the security world. So the people who we see engaging with customers the most effectively, they come from that cloud generation. They're the builders. They're the people who are focused on building and migrating and enabling a software business. And those people, they're security savvy, but they don't walk into a customer with a like, hey, here's a security thing that you have to buy in order to check a few boxes. They want to offer security tools that actually help the customer get better, help democratize the skills, and help understand what's happening and make their software better, not just sort of check a box for a compliance environment, some compliance requirement. So we see a real shift in what the channel providers and the consultants are what they want, what they're working with their customers to do. And I think that's going to continue to change. We've already seen a big change in terms of, the channel providers that used to sell boxes versus channel providers who help people build businesses. Those are very different. And we're fully aligned with the ones that help build businesses.
Abner, thank you so much for taking time out today and talking to me today, not only just about what Lacework is doing, but also kind of overall ecosystem and how also the cloud generation and how to solve the security problem for them. And I look forward to talk to you again. Thank you.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure to talk to you today, and I look forward to our next conversation.